Sue Aspinall is an experienced teacher who has lived in Malaysia, London, Japan, and is currently teaching at the British School in the Netherlands. Sue will be discussing how traveling solo through Central Asia from Tokyo to here in The Hague taught her more about leading in international schools than any course ever could. Please welcome Sue to the stage.
I love having adventures, be they close to home or further afield in remote regions of the world. I love standing away from what's familiar. So what I want to do is share with you some of the lessons I've learned from the adventures that I've had. I love to dream and make big plans, so the idea to travel the Silk Roads came to me well before I went to live in Japan. I had these romantic notions of travelling with bearded traders, with their camels laden with exotic wares through deserted deserts. The reality, actually, from my home in high-tech Tokyo, of these images and bygone trading days, was far from what I was experiencing. But it's amazing how your dreams nag away, emerge, and try to be realised. So like any experience in life, I had a plan. I put a map on the wall of my kitchen in Tokyo, and I drew a line right through the middle of it, through some countries that I thought I would be able to travel through. The distance from Tokyo to The Hague, I measured as 10,000 kilometres, but that's in a straight line. It's amazing how, once you commit to something, opportunities start to open up for you. I found it relatively easy to sell my belongings and also to get the visas that I needed for some of the countries I was travelling through. It was almost as if my plan was unfolding before me. But I learned that the most anxious moment is just before you set off. I stressed at the fact I'd have to carry money in a belt around my waist, a walking target for bandits, I thought. The moment the boat set sail from Japan to China, I felt this amazing unleashing of creative energy, and anything seemed possible. I was so excited, but also really full of trepidation. But I've never felt so alive in my life. Every day that I travelled, I looked around me to see what local people were doing, and I took my cues from them. I bought a ticket for a bed on a bus and travelled long distances in China with people who actually became like a family to me. I took a lift with a man from the northern border of Turkmenistan to the capital Ashgabat. We stopped for tea and kebabs along the way, and we had these weird, wonderful conversations full of frantic gesturing and the odd universal word. But I learned that our connection is not dependent on a common language, that it's actually our openness, our friendliness, our smile. It's our way of being that builds connection. And I learned the true meaning of humanity. I'm a vegetarian, and I travelled through mainly meat-eating communities, and I learned to put down my principles, be flexible, so as not to offend, and to make connections with social groups from all sorts of different backgrounds. And I have a bizarre craving for hardship in my life. And one day I trekked right up to the top of a ridge in Kyrgyzstan, only to find on the other side it was even steeper and covered with snow. But what do you do in a situation like that? Do you go back and give up? Or do you trudge carefully forwards through to the valley below? And I learnt the unique quality of solitude and self-sufficiency. Being at one with nature, camping by a frozen lake. And wow, that silence. I learnt to live simply, to be spontaneous and trust my intuition. Adventures take you to the most incredible places in the world, raw, wild, natural places. And I learnt to deeply respect the planet I live on and the part I have to play in keeping it that way. Along the way, I realised that the relations I made with people were absolutely key. It was the jokes and the laughter we shared. It was our friendship. The amazing kindness that exists in the world. And I was constantly reminded that our differences do not need to be barriers to our connections. This man came down the path behind me in Kazakhstan carrying a knife. But then he bent down beside me and he opened his rucksack, and inside were the most beautiful, luscious, large mushrooms I've ever seen in my life. And this girl I met outside a village in South Tajikistan. She trains the young boys to herd goats, and she takes the biggest village herd right up to the top pastures every week. She's known in this area for her skill, her strength, and her leadership. And her father is so proud of her. And this man, I met him in a market in Uzbekistan. He thought it was hilarious to be having tea with me. And he ran off into the crowd with his mobile phone because I'd put a number in it for our next date. I have no idea what we talked about, but we had this great time together. So every adventure needs to have a destination, a goal, something to focus on. I carried a piece of silk with me from Nara, Japan, to the Grand Bazaar in Istanbul, Turkey. It was a symbolic representation of the purpose of my trip. So I want to finish by inviting you all to embrace adventure in your life, because I believe it strengthens our attitude to life, our positive self-belief, and our courage to step into everything the world has to offer. Thank you.